$30 per kilogram. That is the potential market value of high-quality organic ginger. This crop is not merely a flavor additive for the kitchen, it is a pharmaceutical factory and a high-yield economic asset. In an era of fluctuating food prices, a single healthy rhizome acts as a biological investment, capable of multiplying its own mass significantly within a single season. Why rely on unstable supply chains? Store-bought roots are often desiccated, treated with growth inhibitors, and travel thousands of miles. Home cultivation eliminates the logistics. However, many growers encounter a critical physiological error. The plant directs all its energy upward. Green stalks shoot up to 1 meter in height. Foliage becomes dense and lush. On the surface, the organism appears to be thriving, but underground, the rhizome is starving. Upon excavation, the grower finds only thin, fibrous knots instead of heavy, water-filled tubers. The plant has misallocated its carbon resources. It prioritized solar collection over nutrient storage. This is a failure of energy management. There is a nuance here. This vegetative overgrowth is not random. 10 specific biological factors trigger this imbalance. Each factor acts as a switch. When these variables are uncontrolled, the ginger builds leaves. When they are optimized, the plant redirects its metabolic power downward. The soil becomes a production unit. In fast motion, the roots swell, the skin tightens, and the biomass accumulates. Optimization does not stop at simple fixes. Advanced techniques exist to manipulate the life cycle of the plant. This allows for larger root development and extends the harvest window beyond the standard biological clock. The mechanism is precise. That is how you secure a perpetual supply of valuable nutrients. 2 feet of green foliage. That tells you nothing about what is happening underground. Why does ginger produce a forest of leaves but a harvest that barely fills a teacup? The answer lies in the quality of the starting material. Most crops rely on seeds to propagate. Ginger is different. It relies on cloning. You are planting a rhizome. This is not a root in the traditional sense. It is a thick, fleshy underground stem that acts as a biological battery. Why does the plant fail to yield? The mechanism is simple. If the rhizome is old or dried out, the internal battery is depleted. The eyes, which are the small growth buds, may be dead. A weak piece of ginger will still attempt to grow. It pushes out green shoots using the very last reserves of stored carbohydrates. On the surface, it looks alive. But inside, the system is collapsing. The energy runs out before the new root structure can establish itself in the clay. The result is a tall, leafy stalk standing on a weak, skeletal foundation. To fix this, you need high-grade biological assets. Start with fresh organic roots. Inspect them closely. You're looking for multiple visible buds. These are small, swollen bumps on the beige skin. Each eye is a potential new plant. Commercial grocery stores often treat non-organic ginger with growth inhibitors. This chemical coating halts cell division to extend shelf life. Avoid these roots. They will never sprout properly. Look for organic stock at garden centers. Avoid anything that looks shriveled, moldy, or gray. Before the soil touches the skin, water is required. Submerge the rhizomes in a container of water. Let them soak for several hours. This is not for cleaning. It is a physiological trigger. Water penetrates the tough outer skin and rehydrates the desiccated tissues. The dormant buds receive a hydro signal to wake up. This hydration jump-starts the metabolic engine. Once planted, these rehydrated eyes will swell. New shoots will break the surface within a few weeks, provided there is consistent warmth. Efficiency is key here. Do not plant the entire mass as one lump. Divide the root. Cut the ginger into smaller sections. Each segment needs at least 1 or 2 healthy buds to function. But there is a critical nuance. Do not plant immediately after cutting. A fresh cut is an open wound. In damp soil, it invites bacteria, fungi, and rot. Leave the pieces exposed to air for 24 hours. Observe the cut surface. The wet flesh dries out. It forms a callus. This hard scabbing layer creates a biological shield against pathogens. Only then is it safe to plant. Planting a massive chunk is a waste of resources. Planting a tiny sliver without an eye is a waste of time. You need the correct ratio of biomass to growth potential. Think of the rhizome as the foundation of a building. A healthy start dictates the structural integrity of the entire plant. Strong roots produce vigorous shoots. More importantly, they trigger the formation of new rhizomes underground. If you have ever harvested ginger and found only thin, stringy fibers, the cause was likely poor starting stock. It is a logistical error that ruins the output. Fix the input, and the output changes. By selecting fresh roots and soaking them, you alter the biological trajectory. The plant does not just survive, it expands. Instead of a withered disappointment, you get a dense, heavy yield. The bucket fills with solid food, the harvest is secured. Green leaves are often a deceptive indicator of success. Why does the plant produce a massive canopy but a starving root system? The answer lies in physical confinement. Ginger operates on a horizontal axis. Unlike a carrot that drills vertically, this rhizome is a creeping storage unit. It seeks to conquer territory sideways. If the container is too narrow, the biological mechanism hits a wall. The plant senses the restriction immediately. It panics. Instead of swelling with starch underground, it diverts all energy resources upward. It produces foliage to survive because it cannot expand its foundation. You must provide a container with significant volume. Aim for a vessel that is wide, with genuine capacity. The technical minimum for depth is 12 to 18 inches. However, width is the critical variable. The rhizome needs a runway to extend its reach. A narrow pot acts as a prison cell. Width allows the root system to travel, branch, and thicken without colliding with hard plastic barriers. While lateral space is the priority, vertical depth remains necessary to insulate the developing crop from rapid temperature fluctuations. On the surface, the pot seems adequate, but inside, the roots are suffocating. Soil volume dictates the oxygen supply. A cramped container limits the total amount of nutrient-dense material available to the plant. When space is tight, competition for oxygen becomes fierce. The plant stops building storage tissue. To fix this, the growing medium must be porous. Use a loose, free-draining mix. Think of it as an aeration system. A blend incorporating perlite or pine bark fines keeps the microscopic pore spaces open. This allows oxygen to circulate directly to the rhizomes. Dense, compacted soil acts like a mechanical vise. It physically crushes the expanding cells, resulting in skinny, fibrous roots instead of plump, marketable knobs. Placement is a strategic decision. Never plant the seed piece directly against the container wall. Upon closer inspection, a rhizome hitting a boundary curls back on itself. It deforms. It competes with its own tissue. Give the plant an interior buffer. Placing the seed a few inches from the edge provides a clear path for natural branching. This encourages the formation of multiple harvestable fingers rather than a single knotted lump. There is a logistical nuance here. Commercial cultivation often utilizes vertical layering. Start with the container only half filled. As the green shoot elongates, add fresh soil in thin strata. This mimics natural forest accumulation. It creates fresh real estate for new rhizomes to form above the original piece. It also shields the delicate skin from solar radiation, which can toughen the texture. In fast motion, the soil level rises to meet the growing stem, keeping the product submerged and protected. If utilizing open ground, the engineering principles remain identical. A wide bed with at least 1 foot of loosened soil allows for proper spacing. Place pieces 6 to 8 inches apart. Raised beds are superior in this application. They drain faster and warm up earlier in the season, triggering the underground expansion phase sooner. Material choice plays a functional role. Fabric pots allow gas exchange through the walls, preventing root rot. Heavy ceramic acts as a thermal battery, stabilizing the soil temperature against cold snaps. Plastic works provided the drainage is aggressive, but size remains the non-negotiable factor. If previous yields were low despite lush foliage, the container was the bottleneck. Upgrading to a wider vessel releases the biological brake. The plant receives permission to build mass. The result is a dense, heavy root system ready for extraction. The harvest is secured. 240 days. That is the absolute minimum investment required for a viable ginger root. Premature harvesting is the single most common reason for underweight yields in practical agronomy. Unlike rapid cycle crops such as radishes or lettuce, which sprint to maturity in weeks, ginger operates on a slow, deliberate biological calendar. It requires a long season to complete its chemical processes. If the extraction occurs too early, the rhizome has not had time to solidify nutrients. The result is a thin, watery fiber structure that lacks density and pungent compounds. Why does the grower often misjudge the timing? Because the visual signal is deceptive. Above the ground, the foliage may look massive and lush, but underneath, the biomass accumulation has barely begun. Ginger needs 8 to 10 months from the moment of planting to reach full physiological maturity. The growth cycle is divided into strict phases. During the first 4 months, the organism directs 100% of its energy into vertical construction. It builds strong stems and broad leaves to maximize photosynthetic surface area. At this stage, the underground section is merely an anchor. It is only after the midpoint of the season that the mechanism shifts. The plant stops building upwards and begins building outwards. Sugars generated by the leaves are transported down into the darkness of the soil. This is where the bulk is created. The rhizome swells, pushing against the surrounding earth. The cells fill with starch and essential oils. To interrupt this process is to rob the harvest of its primary mass. On the surface, the plant looks like it is dying, but inside, it is finalizing the storage process. The reliable indicator for harvest is senescence. The leaves begin to turn yellow and dry out at the tips. This is not a failure of health. It is a calculated biological withdrawal. The plant is draining the last reserves of energy from the foliage and injecting them into the root system for winter survival. This transfer must be allowed to finish. Wait until the stalks are largely withered. This indicates that the rhizome is fully charged. At this stage, the root is dense, heavy, and saturated with flavor. There is a structural difference as well. Young ginger, harvested at 4 or 5 months, has a paper-thin skin and high water content. It bruises easily and rots quickly in storage. Mature ginger develops a thick, cork-like skin. This outer layer acts as a protective shield, allowing the root to be stored in cool conditions for months without desiccation. Harvesting is a precise operation. Rough extraction disturbs the soil matrix and can shock the remaining root systems. The underground structure requires stability to harden. If the grower digs around the plant too frequently to check progress, the microscopic root hairs are severed, halting fluid intake. The growth cycle stalls. Another critical error involves the foliage. Cutting the green leaves before they yellow is biologically expensive. These leaves function as solar panels. They are the primary power source for the underground factory. Removing them early cuts the power line. The starch accumulation stops immediately. When the timeline is complete, mechanical extraction begins. Use a hand fork to gently loosen the compacted earth around the base. In accelerated motion, the soil lifts and cracks, revealing the tan clusters beneath. Lift the clump with care. The difference in weight is palpable. The skin is tough, resisting scratches. The interior flesh snaps with a crisp sound, rather than bending. For a perpetual cycle, total extraction is not necessary. The grower can harvest the primary mass while leaving select segments in the ground. As long as the soil remains warm and holds moisture, these remnant sections will act as biological starters. They will trigger new node development for the next cycle. If the yield has been high in foliage but low in root mass, the variable is almost always time. The plant requires the full duration to convert light into solid matter. Patience is the only mechanism that turns a few grams of tissue into a heavy, starch-filled harvest. The fourth reason your ginger produces excessive foliage: photons are energy, but for a ginger rhizome, direct solar exposure is a survival threat. Why does a plant with massive foliage often produce a tiny, fibrous root? It is a defensive reaction. The plant is panicking. Ginger is originally an understory species. It requires brightness, not radiation. Under harsh, direct sunlight, the biological priority shifts instantly. The goal changes from expansion to protection. The plant burns valuable carbohydrates to produce excess foliage. These leaves act as a shield. They shade the soil to retain moisture, but this comes at a heavy cost. The energy required to build this canopy is stolen from the underground reserves. The rhizome stops growing. It waits for better biological conditions that may never come. Deep shade creates a different logistical nightmare. The plant detects a lack of photons. It enters emergency elongation mode. In fast motion, the stems stretch upward. Internodes lengthen aggressively. The cellular structure becomes thin and weak. The leaves expand, turning a dark, desperate green to catch every available photon. This is resource mismanagement. All biological capital is spent on vertical reach. Nothing is left for the tuber. The root system stalls completely. Seen from up close, the difference is physical. A stressed leaf curls inward to reduce surface area. The edges turn crisp and brown. This is solar scorch. It destroys the chlorophyll factories needed to produce starch. The target is specific: high lumen, indirect illumination. In the wild, this is the dappled light of the forest floor. For the grower, it means simulation. Morning sun is acceptable. It carries lower ultraviolet intensity, but by noon, the plant needs cover. A location with afternoon shade is critical. This keeps the soil temperature stable. It prevents rapid evaporation. On the surface, the light seems soft and diffused. But inside the leaf tissues, photosynthesis hits peak efficiency without thermal stress. Indoor cultivation requires engineered solutions. A south-facing window is often too aggressive without a filter. A sheer curtain acts as an atmosphere, scattering the rays. There is one nuance here. Static light creates uneven growth. Container growers must rotate the pot every 14 days. This ensures every leaf operates as a generator. Reflective surfaces, such as white walls, can bounce ambient lumens back onto the shaded side of the plant. If natural light fails, technology fills the gap. A full-spectrum light-emitting diode setup is sufficient. You do not need industrial grow lights. A simple supplemental source extends the photo period without overheating the foliage. The plant communicates through geometry. Observation is the primary tool. A healthy specimen stands upright. The leaves are firm, medium green, and angled to the source. If the foliage looks bleached or pale, the intensity is too high. If the stems are falling over, the light is too weak. Seasonality adds another variable. As the solar angle shifts from spring to midsummer, a safe location can turn into a kill zone. The grower must be mobile. Moving a container just 3 feet can save the entire crop. In accelerated motion, the canopy adjusts. Leaves turn to track the ambient brightness. The stems thicken as carbon production stabilizes. In the ground, use structure. A trellis or a taller crop provides a shadow corridor. The formula is rigid. High brightness, zero burn. When the balance is struck, the foliage becomes a power plant. It sends a steady stream of sugars downward. The result is a dense, heavy rhizome ready for harvest. "90% of a plant is water, yet water is the primary killer of the harvest. Why does the foliage explode while the rhizome shrinks? The answer lies in the physics of soil saturation. Ginger craves consistent hydration. It rejects wet feet. When the substrate remains waterlogged, the biological priority shifts. the plant enters emergency mode. Energy diverts from underground storage to upper leaf production. It tries to transpire excess liquid through foliage to survive. This is a desperate defense mechanism, not healthy growth. The opposite extreme is equally destructive. Aridity causes immediate biological stalling. The tips of the leaves turn brown and brittle. New rhizome nodes abort before they can swell. The goal is a precise hydro balance. The soil must remain consistently damp, like a wrung-out sponge. Tactile inspection is the only reliable metric. Insert a finger into the top inch of the medium. If it feels dry and dusty, water is required. If it feels cool and cohesive, wait 24 hours. This pause allows oxygen to re-enter the pore spaces. On the surface, the pot appears static. But underground, roots are actively consuming oxygen molecules. Without this gas exchange, fermentation begins. The result is a dense, fibrous knot instead of a crisp, edible root. Gravity must do its work. Drainage is absolute. The container requires multiple exit points at the base. Standing water in a collection saucer creates a toxic, anaerobic swamp. Excess liquid must escape immediately. Elevate the container on spacers or pot feet. This simple engineering adjustment keeps the drainage channels clear of obstruction. In open ground, avoid depressions where rain pools. Soil texture dictates hydraulic behavior. A mix dense with fine particles acts like concrete, trapping water and suffocating the rhizome. The solution is aeration. Quality potting soil mixed with perlite or pine bark fines creates a lattice structure. Water flows through, leaving behind only a microscopic film of moisture on the particles. This is the ideal environment. If the substrate compacts, do not attempt to fix it later. Lighten the density before planting, but volume matters as much as frequency. Avoid shallow daily sprinkling. This keeps only the top layer saturated, while the bottom zones remain arid and stale. Instead, saturate the medium completely. Water until runoff appears, then stop. This heavy soak forces the root network to stretch downward. A drying cycle between applications signals the roots to explore the container limits. In fast motion, moisture vapor rises from bare soil, disappearing into the atmosphere. To stop this loss, apply a barrier. A thin layer of shredded leaves or cocoa chips acts as an insulator. It stabilizes surface temperatures. However, maintain a gap near the stems. Constant wet contact against the green tissue invites bacterial rot. The plant communicates its status through structural changes. Leaves that look thin and then perk up rapidly after irrigation indicate chronic underwatering. The stress cycle is too severe. Conversely, yellowing foliage moving from the base upward signals a crisis. If the stems turn soft and the pot emits a musty fungal odor, the roots are drowning. Immediate airflow correction is necessary. Loosen the surface gently. Geography alters consumption. In high heat and bright light, the transpiration rate doubles. The plant acts as a pump, moving water rapidly. In cool conditions, this pump slows down. Indoor climate control adds another variable. Heating units dry the air, while air conditioning removes humidity. Do not trust a calendar. Trust the physical state of the soil. Morning irrigation yields the highest efficiency. The plant hydrates before the solar peak. By evening, the foliage is dry, reducing the risk of surface pathogens. Self-watering systems are a viable tool, but they carry risks. The reservoir should not remain perpetually full. The wicking zone requires a breathing period. In regions with high humidity, standard free-draining pots are safer. Control the water, and you control the yield. The energy will channel into the rhizome, producing a heavy, harvest-ready ginger root. 1 kilogram of leaves often yields 0 kilograms of harvest. Why does the ginger plant refuse to build its prized rhizome? The answer lies in the physics of the soil matrix. The underground stem does not push through concrete. It requires a vacuum-like looseness to expand. Dense clay acts as a vise. It compresses the rhizome, physically halting cellular expansion. The plant reacts defensively. Instead of fighting the pressure below, it directs energy upwards. This results in a dense canopy of green, but a barren harvest underground. The ginger root needs a substrate that crumbles upon touch. But pressure is only half the equation. Oxygen is the fuel. Upon closer inspection, roots in compacted soil suffocate. Without gas exchange, metabolic processes stall. To prevent this, the substrate needs structural porosity. Perlite or pine bark fines act as permanent scaffolding. They create microscopic tunnels where air circulates freely. Even when the soil is wet, these pockets allow the root to breathe. If oxygen levels drop, the biological priority shifts. The plant maintains its foliage for survival rather than investing in heavy storage tissue. Chemistry dictates the next phase. Ginger operates within a strict window, 6.0 to 7.0 on the pH scale. In this specific range, chemical bonds loosen. Phosphorus and potassium become water-soluble and enter the root system instantly. If the acidity drifts too low or too high, these critical elements lock up. On the surface, the leaves remain green, but underground, the rhizome stops growing completely. Nitrogen is the most dangerous variable. It is a deception. High doses force rapid, soft foliage growth. The plant builds a massive solar array but forgets the battery storage. The stems become weak and collapse under heat stress. The grower needs a strategic deficit. The goal is a ratio of 5 to 10 to 10. Low nitrogen keeps the top growth modest. High phosphorus drives energy down. A light feeding once a month is sufficient. In accelerated motion, the foliage stabilizes while the tuber swells beneath the dirt. Nature offers a slower alternative. Mature compost provides a stable baseline. It improves the crumb structure of the soil. However, raw inputs are a risk. Fresh manure is a chemical weapon. It spikes nitrogen levels and scorches delicate root hairs with excess salts. The tissue burns within hours. A safer additive is leaf mold or composted bark. It creates a sponge-like texture that retains moisture without drowning the system. Micronutrients act as the ignition switch. Magnesium, iron, and manganese run the photosynthetic machinery. Without them, efficiency drops. Diagnostics require close observation. At the leaf level, pale new growth with dark green veins indicates iron chlorosis. Yellowing between the veins on older foliage points to a magnesium shortage. These are not cosmetic issues. They are signs of system failure. A light, complete feed resolves this faster than a heavy deluge. There is one nuance here regarding toxicity. Up close, white crystals form on the pot rim. This is toxic buildup. In container environments, evaporation leaves behind fertilizer residue. These salts accumulate until they burn the root tips. The solution is a hydraulic flush. Water must pass through the entire column, carrying the excess waste out the bottom. This resets the chemical balance of the root zone and prevents slow decline. The plant broadcasts its status constantly. Dark, velvet-textured leaves that expand overnight signal a nitrogen overdose. The biology is moving too fast. Conversely, stunted clumps and dull pigmentation reveal starvation. The system has stalled. Corrections must be singular. Changing one variable allows the grower to track the result over 7 to 14 days. The soil mix is not just dirt. It is the control panel. By maintaining porosity and restricting nitrogen, the biological directive shifts. The plant stops building a canopy, it starts building a reserve. That is how you turn chemical inputs into solid mass. Green leaves are a deception. A lush canopy does not guarantee a heavy harvest underground. The seventh reason your ginger produces massive foliage but a negligible root system is the atmospheric environment. The climate is incorrect. Why does a healthy plant produce a thin, useless rhizome? The answer lies in the biochemistry. Ginger is a biological machine designed for the tropics. Its internal mechanism demands specific operational parameters. It requires steady heat and consistent atmospheric moisture for months on end. When the environment deviates, the mechanism stalls. If temperatures drop or the air becomes arid, the plant triggers a defense protocol. It stops banking starch in the underground storage unit. Instead, it prioritizes leaf maintenance to ensure survival. The result is a deficit in the harvest. The optimal operational window is narrow. Daytime temperatures must range between 70 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit. In Celsius, this is roughly 21 to 29 degrees. Night cycles are equally critical. The thermometer cannot drop below 60 degrees Fahrenheit or 16 degrees Celsius. Below this threshold, photosynthesis decelerates. The chemical conversion of sunlight into sugar slows down. Starch production halts. The root stops expanding. A single cool night is a minor disruption, but repeated drops in temperature create a cumulative deficit. The plant loses size with every cold spell. Frost is not just a stressor, it is a termination event. Cellular structures rupture. If freezing temperatures approach, relocation is mandatory. Move the containers to a covered structure or bring them into a controlled indoor facility. On the surface, the air feels fine to a human. But inside the leaf, the stomata are reacting to pressure. Humidity acts as a shield. Ginger functions best in moderate to high moisture levels. This keeps the cellular walls flexible and the photosynthesis process efficient. In dry air, the pressure differential forces water out of the leaves. The plant transpires rapidly. It drinks more water just to keep turgor pressure up. Energy is diverted from root storage to immediate hydration. The result is a fibrous, underweight harvest. Indoor cultivation requires artificial atmospheric regulation. A pebble tray creates a localized evaporation zone. The pot sits above the waterline, not submerged. Grouping plants creates a microclimate where transpiration accumulates, but stagnant moisture is a trap. Humidity without movement breeds pathogens. Fungal spores colonize damp stems and saturated soil. Ventilation is the countermeasure. A mechanical fan on a low setting simulates a breeze. It disrupts the boundary layer of air, keeping the leaf surface dry and functional. Outdoors, a location with natural airflow prevents this stagnation. Indoors, the air must be cycled to prevent rot without chilling the foliage. Air temperature is only half the equation. The root zone has its own thermal requirements. Soil acts as a thermal battery. However, the container material influences the discharge rate. Upon closer inspection, thin plastic containers fail to retain heat. Dark, thin walls bleed thermal energy into the cold concrete below. The root zone chills rapidly. In cool climates, insulation is necessary. Use thick-walled ceramic or place the vessel on wood. A layer of organic mulch acts as a blanket, stabilizing the internal temperature and reducing evaporation rates. Timing determines yield. In northern latitudes, germination must begin indoors. Relocation occurs only when night temperatures stabilize. In high heat zones, the strategy flips. The canopy requires shielding from the intense afternoon radiation. Direct solar exposure can overheat the leaves while the soil remains optimal. The goal is to keep energy flowing downward. The plant signals its status through color and form. Leaf edges curl inward. The vibrant green fades to a dull olive. This is a cry for moisture or heat. Conversely, yellowing at the base with soft tissue indicates suffocation. The air is too still. The soil is too wet. Adjust one variable at a time. Increase the temperature. Boost the humidity. Introduce airflow. Correct the imbalance. The plant ceases survival mode and resumes production. The energy flows downward again. That is how you engineer a dense market-grade ginger root. 3 environmental factors define the harvest: warm days, mild nights, steady humidity levels. When combined with light airflow, These elements create a calm atmospheric formula. The plant needs this stability to shift its biological focus from survival to accumulation. It stores energy deep below the surface. If the climate data is correct, the payoff becomes visible only at the moment of excavation. Why does a massive canopy often yield a small fibrous root? It seems like a contradiction. But in practical agronomy, the answer is energy misallocation. The eighth reason for poor production is an overcrowded canopy. When foliage becomes too dense, it creates a negative feedback loop. Humidity gets trapped in the center. Leaves shade their own neighbors. The plant exhausts its sugar reserves, maintaining this massive green architecture instead of banking starch in the rhizome. Intervention requires precision. Thoughtful, selective trimming can redirect the biological flow, but it carries risks. You cannot simply hack away the foliage. These leaves are the plant's solar panels. They capture photons and convert them into mass. Think of trimming as mechanical calibration, not aesthetic improvement. The goal is efficiency. Remove only the liabilities. Target older outer leaves that are yellowing. Cut away torn fibers rubbing against healthy stalks. 20 to 30%. That is the maximum volume of foliage you can remove at one time. Crossing this threshold induces shock. Staying within this limit keeps photosynthesis active while solving the density problem. Light penetrates the base. Air circulates through the clump. After light reduction, the remaining biological machinery works with higher efficiency, supporting better underground storage. Timing dictates survival. Wait until the plant is established. This usually takes several months after the initial planting. Trimming immediately after sprouting is a critical error because the energy reserves are empty. Avoid surgical intervention during heat waves. Do not cut right after repotting. The system needs a stable week. Moisture levels must be high and light must be gentle to ensure recovery. The steel blade must be clean. Use sharp scissors or professional pruners. Wipe the metal with alcohol before starting. Repeat this sterilization if you move between different plants to prevent pathogen transfer. Make smooth, decisive cuts close to the stem. Avoid damaging adjacent tissues. Gravity provides a clue. Remove leaves that consistently droop onto the soil. Wet soil contact creates a bridge for rot and fungus. Thin out the crowded center. If air cannot flow through the middle, the microclimate becomes stagnant. Let the plant signal its needs. Observation is key. If the stalks are tall, floppy, and blocking each other, a volume reduction is necessary. However, look closer. Look, if the leaves are upright and spaced moderately, the system is working. If the pigment is a healthy medium green, no intervention is required. Every leaf you keep is a factory. It sends starch down to the ginger root. The objective is balance, not minimalism. Trimming is only half the equation. Improve the environmental conditions simultaneously. Increase air circulation so the soil surface dries between waterings. Adjust the exposure. The plant requires bright, indirect photons, not the harsh radiation of the afternoon sun. Check the chemical inputs. Excess nitrogen forces the production of soft, lush foliage. This is counterproductive. Switch the fuel source. A fertilizer with lower nitrogen and higher concentrations of phosphorus and potassium sends a chemical signal to the plant. It calms the top growth. It favors expansion below. In a confined container, density mimics a jungle environment. If you find yourself trimming repeatedly just to prevent leaves from smothering each other, the scale is wrong. You are trying to grow too much biomass in one pot. Dividing the clump is the logistical solution. Moving a few pieces to a second container is more effective than constant pruning. Watch for stress signals in the days following the cut. In fast motion, the process should look like this. Leaves perk up and stand freely. Turgidity returns. If you observe wilting or sun scorch, the change was too drastic. The plant has stalled. Apply temporary shade for 48 hours. Maintain the standard hydration schedule. Resume steady care protocols. Canopy management is optional, but it serves as a powerful tool for the grower. Keep the structure open. Keep the tools sterile. Pair this with consistent airflow and moderated feeding. When the top is balanced, the plant stops wasting energy on leaf maintenance. It invests in the only thing that matters, the dense, flavorful root mass. The ninth reason your ginger fails often involves water regulation issues. "100% of the plant's energy is at stake. The ultimate goal is to produce a thick, marketable rhizome. Why do lush green leaves sometimes hide a starving root system? The answer lies in biological stress. Pests and diseases act as energy thieves. Even light pressure from an infestation triggers a costly defense mechanism. The plant stops building its underground reserve. Instead, it diverts carbohydrates to repair damaged tissue. This survival response is immediate. The yield suffers. To the grower, the foliage might look acceptable, but underground, the ginger root remains thin and fibrous. The trick is early detection and precise logistical control. Detection requires a close inspection of the canopy. Under the leaves, distinct signatures appear. Aphids colonize soft new growth, excreting sticky honeydew. Upon closer inspection, spider mites leave fine white speckles. In dry conditions, faint webbing connects the stems. Mealybugs resemble small fragments of white cotton tucked into leaf axils. Thrips scrape the cellular surface. This leaves behind metallic silvery streaks. Every bite slows photosynthesis. Bacterial and fungal pathogens attack differently. Yellow patches signal internal distress. At the soil line, stems become soft and unstable. A musty, damp odor rises from the pot. This is the scent of active rot. Powdery mildew manifests as a fine white dust coating the green surface. It thrives where humidity is trapped. Leaf spots form perfect brown circles that slowly expand. The plant fights back. It burns fuel for immunity rather than starch storage. Prevention relies on environmental control. Moisture must reach the soil, not the foliage. Water on leaves is a vector for disease. Airflow is critical. Stagnant air breeds fungus. In containers, spacing is strictly calculated. A dense canopy prevents ventilation. Thinning allows light to penetrate. A light layer of mulch regulates soil hydration. It prevents water from soaking the stem base. Intervention must be swift and mechanical. A pressurized stream of water physically dislodges aphids. Outdoor plants recover quickly. For mealybugs, alcohol acts as a solvent. A cotton swab wipes them away without damaging plant tissue. Chemical saturation is unnecessary. Neem oil or insecticidal soap works on a broader scale. Application occurs in the evening to avoid leaf burn. The cycle repeats every 5 to 7 days. This timing intercepts the next generation of hatchlings. On the surface, the plant looks clean, but microscopic eggs often remain waiting. Fungal suppression requires a shift in physics. Airflow increases. The drying period between irrigation cycles extends. Heavily damaged leaves are removed to stop the spread. A top dressing of fresh, dry mix absorbs excess surface moisture. Cinnamon powder acts as a natural fungicide on small wounds. If mildew persists, a bicarbonate solution alters the surface pH. The fungus cannot survive the chemical shift. Decline requires a root inspection. The plant is lifted from its container. Healthy ginger is firm and aromatic. Soft, dark sections indicate necrosis. A sterile blade removes the rot. Sulfur dust seals the cut before repotting in an airy mix. Drainage is improved immediately. Biosecurity is the final layer of defense. New plants are potential carriers. Isolation lasts for 2 weeks. This prevents the introduction of hitchhikers into the main crop. The objective is metabolic stability. A calm plant does not waste energy on repair. It focuses entirely on storage. Photosynthesis runs at maximum efficiency. The leaves act as solar panels. The generated energy flows downward. The result is a dense, high-quality ginger rhizome. 10 months of waiting. That is the strict biological price of a high-quality ginger harvest. Why does a plant produce a dense jungle of green foliage but yield a thin, useless root? The answer lies in energy allocation and the physics of time. Ginger is not a rapid crop. It is a slow-burning mechanism. The plant builds momentum over 3 distinct biological phases. If the environment shifts too often, or if the container is disturbed, the metabolic process halts. The plant switches its priority from storage to survival. Instead of depositing starch into the rhizome, it burns calories to adapt to new conditions. Think in seasons, not weeks. From the moment of planting to the extraction of a mature tuber, the cycle requires 8 to 10 months. The first phase lasts 90 days. This is purely construction. The plant establishes shoots and unfolds leaves. These are not just decorations, they are solar panels. The objective is to build a canopy capable of capturing maximum photon energy. Months 4 through 6 are the phase of quiet expansion. Beneath the surface, the root network claims territory. It anchors itself into the soil matrix. Then comes the critical period, months 7 through 10. This is when thickening occurs. The plant begins to transfer energy from the leaves down into the underground storage units. This is a massive caloric shift. On the surface, the green canopy appears static, but underground, the rhizome swells, pushing against the compacted earth to create volume. Any physical interference during this cycle is destructive. If a grower digs to check progress, microscopic root hairs are severed. The connection to the soil moisture is broken. This interrupts the rhythm. Development slows down instantly. The plant must repair the damage before it can resume growing the tuber. Stability is the primary asset. Irrigation is required only when the top inch of substrate becomes dry to the touch. Nutrition is supplied once a month. A balanced feed supports the system without causing chemical burn. Light levels must remain high, but indirect. Temperature and humidity must be constant. In practical agronomy, small, steady habits yield higher tonnage than drastic interventions. Overmanagement is a common error. Constantly moving the container or alternating between flood and drought forces the plant into a state of shock. Ginger root requires a static environment to maximize density. Change must be gradual. If an adjustment is necessary, only one variable is altered at a time. The biological response time is slow. The plant needs 2 weeks to acclimate before another change occurs. Repotting in the middle of the season is mathematically inefficient. It resets the root zone and deletes weeks of progress. If the soil level drops, a light top dressing of aerated mix is applied. This does not disturb the structural integrity of the root ball. Major divisions are reserved for the end of the cycle, when the plant metabolism naturally decelerates. Visual assessment requires knowledge of plant biology. A massive canopy is not a failure. It is the fuel source. As long as the foliage remains upright and medium green, the foundation is solid. The bulk comes later. The plant banks energy in the leaves, waiting for the final signal to push it downward into the rhizomes. Logistics determine the harvest window. A physical logbook or digital record prevents calculation errors. Planting dates, sprouting times, and feeding schedules are data points that remove guesswork. If the seed goes into the ground in April, the extraction date is mathematically fixed for October or December. Digging in August yields nothing but fiber and disappointment. Consistency must be protected from external variables. A sudden heat wave demands artificial shading to prevent transpiration stress. A cold front requires immediate thermal insulation. These are not suggestions. They are protective buffers that keep the physiological train on the tracks. Seen in high speed, the leaves lose their turgidity. The vibrant green fades. This is the final signal. When the foliage begins to yellow naturally, the nitrogen cycle is ending, growth stops. The plant has moved all its resources into the root. This is the cue for extraction. If a sample is needed, a side section is carefully removed The main system is left intact to continue the thickening process. Patience and strict adherence to protocol turn leafy biomass into dense, heavy baskets of ginger root. Keep conditions steady, avoid physical disturbance. The season requires time to complete the transfer of energy. The result of this discipline is a harvest of maximum weight and aromatic potency. Here is a simple technique. Two inches of loose soil. That is the precise margin required to double the efficiency of rhizome production. In practical agronomy, yield is not just about water and light. It is about understanding the geometry of the plant. Ginger does not grow down like a carrot. It is a creeping subterranean stem that conquers territory horizontally. Why bury a plant that naturally seeks the surface? It seems counterproductive. But in the wild, this is a survival strategy driven by gravity and debris. In the rainforest floor environment, falling leaves and decaying organic matter constantly accumulate. This creates a slow rising tide of biomass. The plant has adapted to this pressure. It detects the weightless cover and responds by pushing fresh growth nodes upward and outward into the newly available layer. Hilling mimics this biological reality in a controlled environment. The mechanic is simple. By periodically adding 1 to 2 inches of substrate, the grower creates artificial real estate. The root system interprets this as an invitation to expand. The material selection determines the success of the operation. Heavy clay acts as a concrete cap, suffocating the gas exchange. The rhizome requires a porous matrix. A technical blend of potting mix, perlite, coco coir, or fine bark is essential. These materials ensure oxygen reaches the epidermal layer of the root. Upon closer inspection, the mix must be loose enough for the blunt ends of the ginger to push through without mechanical resistance. Timing is critical for the metabolic engine. The process begins only when the canopy is fully established. The solar panels, the leaves, must be operational and generating surplus energy. Once several healthy shoots are visible, the first intervention occurs. The grower applies a thin stratum, 1 inch of material, no more. In accelerated motion, the process unfolds over weeks. The white tips of the ginger breach the surface. The grower covers them again. This cycle repeats. Small, calculated additions are safer than a sudden, deep burial, which could shock the system. On the surface, it appears to be a static pile of dirt. But inside, a complex cellular expansion is taking place within the dark, moist void. This technique serves a dual purpose beyond just volume. It acts as a shield against environmental stress. Underground, the ginger skin remains pale, tender, and metabolically active. If exposed to direct solar radiation and dry air, the plant reacts defensively. It toughens the skin, creating a fibrous bark-like barrier to prevent dehydration. This ruins the texture of the crop. The soil cover maintains a stable microclimate, smoothing out humidity fluctuations and preventing UV damage. Weeds are also suppressed. The constant addition of material buries competitive seeds before they can establish a root system near the crown. Precision is mandatory during application. The photosynthetic stems must remain clear. Covering the green stalks halts energy production and invites rot. The new mix creates a collar around the base, stopping short of smothering the vertical shoots. Compaction is the enemy. If the surface seals into a crust, gas exchange stops. The grower must manually fluff the top layer, breaking any seal to reopen the air pockets. Water is applied sparingly. The goal is contact and settling, not saturation. A soggy cap cuts off oxygen and breeds anaerobic bacteria. But mechanical manipulation is only half the equation. Spatial logistics play a massive role. If the container is restricted, the expansion force hits a wall. New growth presses against neighbors, resulting in deformed, stunted clumps. A large vessel combined with an airy surface encourages lateral branching. This produces distinct, harvestable fingers rather than a single cramped mass. Chemical inputs drive the behavior of the plant. High nitrogen triggers leaf production. To maximize the underground biomass, the feeding regimen must be moderate and balanced. The plant is directed to invest energy in storage, the root, rather than a new wave of soft foliage. The hilling process acts as a finish line tool. In the final months, the biological clock slows down. Leaves yellow as chlorophyll degrades. A final light layer protects the swelling pieces, keeping them clean for the extraction phase. When the harvest is finally lifted, the results are visible. The thickest, most viable segments are found in the newest, loosest material at the top of the root zone. The plant utilized the artificial space to its maximum potential. This creates a heavy, dense yield ready for processing.